This is the frontispiece of the Codex Mendoza, and this is from the Viceroyalty of New Spain. And it is created in 1541 to 1542, and it is ink and color on paper. And it's about 12 and 3/8 inches by 8 and 7/16 inches, so not very large. It's in the Bodleian Library at Oxford University. And so this would have been the cover of the Codex Mendoza. So an Aztec scribe drew an idealized representation of the city Tenochtitlan and its sacred ceremonial precinct for the Spanish viceroy in 1545, which forms the first page of the Codex Mendoza. It was commissioned by Antonio de Mendoza, the first viceroy of New Spain, for the presentation to Emperor Charles V of Spain. The Codex consists of native style. It's handsomely colored pictorial scenes on European paper, records important information about Aztec/Mexica imperial history, economic organization, and about society. And this one's another really important piece to kind of show how the Mexica people see the passage of time. So this is a visual depiction of the passage of time, similar to what the calendar stone was for the Templo Mayor. So this codex was divided into three distinct sections. Part one is the conquest section, is a history of the Mexica kings from the founding of Tenochtitlan to the arrival of the Spanish. And then part two is the tribute section. It's an account of the provinces which owed tribute to the Mexica kings. Part three is the daily life section, which contains ethnographic data pertaining to the life cycle of individuals from birth to marriage, as well as about the various occupations of priests, warriors, and other professions. It was commissioned by royal authorities. It is not entirely clear if the Viceroy Mendoza or officials in Spain initiated the project, but it definitely was executed by Indian scribes and informants who still had first-hand knowledge of what pre-conquest conditions were like 20 years after the fall of Tenochtitlan. So this may have been an attempt by the indigenous to record and describe their own way of life and translate this understanding for an outsider's benefit. So as a result, we see some use of key Aztec symbols and stylistic traits and have evidence of art that was otherwise destroyed by the conquerors. So it was created from copied parts of pre-conquest indigenous manuscripts and intended to aid the Spanish monarch into understanding his new Mexica subjects. The Codex Mendoza is in book format with individual pages. Each page addresses information from a specific time period without flowing from one to another. So it's not necessarily, focusing on day one, day two, day three. It's the frontispiece of the Codex Mendoza addresses time directly by juxtaposing the settling of Tenochtitlan, and that's when the eagle on the cactus, which is a mythological representation of the homeland, that's the eagle on the cactus is the settling of Tenochtitlan. Then the Mexica conquest of other peoples are the figures that are holding the hair of another showing victory. And then the Mexica defeat by the Spanish is the one where there's smoke coming out of the square by the lower right-hand corner. And then also the squares and the glyphs, these are the squares and the glyphs around it, span pre to post pre-Hispanic times. The rectilinear presentation is repeated with the depiction of the four-part city, or the four parts of the Aztec cities, surrounded by a frame. The page border is also an accommodation to the cyclicality as shown within the Aztec calendar stone. So even though it's a rectangular shaped page, the gap at the top left edge prevents from the formation from closing, and that's significant because it's not supposed to be like a linear timeline, like a Spanish linear timeline. the Aztecs, they see it as a cycle and it doesn't repeat. And so that's the main thing that's different. So on the content side, an eagle is perched on a prickly pear cactus growing out of a stone, the symbol of the city, and that fills really kind of the center of the page. And then the waterways divide the cities into the four quarters and indicate a lake surrounding the city, corresponding to the Aztec view of the five directions: north, south, east, west, and center. Early leaders of Tenochtitlan are shown at the bottom, sitting in the four quadrants. The victorious leaders at the bottom of the page represent the Aztec conquest and count the years that surround the scene. The image combines historical narration with idealized cartography, showing the city in the middle of the lake at the moment of its founding, and then depictions of various ranks, honors, wardrobes of warriors and priests, and so on are also depicted. The various patterns employed on clothing, shields, and headdresses indicate a desire to differentiate between people's different functions and their achievements. At the center of Tenochtitlan was the sacred precinct, a walled enclosure that contained a dozen temples and other buildings, and that's the focal point of the sacred precinct is the Great Pyramid or the Templo Mayor. This frontispiece demonstrates the beginning and ending of the Mexica dominance in time. This presentation of the Spanish takeover as part of the Mexica history also has a strikingly colonial message, which the monarch would have expected and appreciated. Today, the Codex Mendoza is considered the smartest, most economical, and most user-friendly packaging of any Mexican pictorial manuscript with analysis to date. It is a major scholarly sourcebook containing all kinds of tools and background and that is necessary for really understanding the Mexican system of writing and record keeping, and then translating that into how that makes the Spanish more important because they have now taken over such a huge, important empire in the region that we now know as Mexico City. So this is a really important piece, and it's in England today, which I think is weird. But these pieces end up all over the place. So, all right, moving on to our next piece. We're getting close.